Usually when we look back at the grand sweep of human history, um, we frame it as this ultimate triumph.
Right, the big success story.
Exactly. Think about the story we tell ourselves. We crawled out of the chaotic, dangerous wilderness, and we built order. We created laws to keep us safe.
Hmm.
We drew up borders to build nations, and, we organized society into this incredibly complex, interlocking machine just to protect ourselves from the wild.
Yeah, it's the classic narrative of human progress.
Right. But what if we completely misunderstood the assignment?
Oh, wow.
Like, what if every single system we've painstakingly built to keep ourselves safe, the laws, the borders, the governments, what if all of that is actually a giant, catastrophic mistake that is actively causing all of our suffering?
I mean, it completely flips the script on what we consider to be civilization.
Totally.
The foundational premise of our modern world is that structure equals safety. But this source material looks at that structure and, well, it basically calls it a prison.
And that is the driving question of our deep dive today. We were exploring a source text from 2019 by a philosophical author named Shefeng titled Analysis of the Way of Nature.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating piece of work.
It is. We're going to dive deep into a radically different perspective on how human society should function, focusing heavily on this massive fundamental conflict the text presents between our modern social institutions and the natural world.
Specifically, we'll be analyzing why things we take as absolute givens, like laws and national borders, are viewed here as totally unnatural traps.
Right. And before we jump in, just to be clear to you listening, we are dealing with some highly provocative, politically charged ideas today regarding borders, governments, and social institutions.
Definitely.
Our job here isn't to take a side or endorse these views, but simply to impartially unpack what the author is arguing in the source material. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because reading through this, I couldn't help but think of an analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
It feels like human society is this massive, impossibly complicated piece of software that we've been, desperately trying to code and patch for centuries.
Like legacy code that's just barely holding together.
Exactly. It's full of bugs, it keeps crashing, and we just keep adding more lines of code, like more laws, more regulations to fix the old code. Whereas this text is essentially arguing that we should have just stuck with the universe's original flawless operating system.
That is a really great way to put it. The author is issuing this very stark warning that humanity is running a completely incompatible program.
Yeah.
We are dangerously out of sync with that original operating system. And the consequences of that misalignment aren't just philosophical musings.
Right, it's not just theoretical.
No, the text argues the consequences are devastating, tangible, and playing out all around us right now.
So before we can really understand why all of society's rules and codes are being critiqued so harshly, we need to understand the rule book this text suggests we should be following instead. Right. The source calls it the way of nature, or Tao. How does the text actually define this blueprint of the universe?
Well, the source defines the way of nature as the way of the greatest creator. It describes this state with very specific, defining characteristics:
Which are?
non-action, silence, harmony, and freedom. The text frames it as the ultimate outline and the absolute law of the universe. It's the way of heaven.
Okay.
And what's really fascinating here is that the text presents this not as a gentle self-help suggestion for a better life. It presents it as an inescapable physical law of the universe.
I want to pause on one of those characteristics you mentioned, non-action. Because when I first read that, my modern brain immediately translated it to, like, laziness or just doing nothing.
Sure, that's a super common reaction.
Right. But that's not quite how the text is using it, is it?
Not at all. Non-action, which actually has deep roots in the concept of wu-wei, it doesn't mean lying on the couch waiting for the universe to provide. It refers to the mechanism of acting without forcing an outcome. It's about moving with the current of a river rather than frantically swimming upstream.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, the text argues that the universe operates effortlessly. A tree doesn't try to grow, it just grows.
Right. The planets don't struggle to orbit.
Exactly. So true alignment means our actions should mirror that effortless natural momentum rather than always trying to bend the universe to our will.
And that ties right into what stood out to me, because the text makes some massive, highly literal claims about cause and effect.
Oh, definitely.
It's not just using the way of nature as a lovely spiritual metaphor for inner peace. It's saying if you force outcomes, if you fight the current, this physical thing will happen to your society.
Yeah, the duality presented in the source material is completely stark. It states plainly that places that obey the way of nature are heaven, and places that go against it are hell.
Which is pretty unambiguous.
Very.
Yeah.
And it gets very specific about the physical manifestations of this hell. The text explicitly claims that natural disasters, it lists tsunamis, tornadoes, hurricanes, droughts, floods, even insect plagues.
Wow, insect plagues too.
Yeah. It says these are not random meteorological or biological events. The author frames them as the text is completely unambiguous. Fighting against heaven, fighting against the earth, or fighting against each other fundamentally breaks the mechanism of harmony, which results in endless suffering.
So what exactly is human society doing to provoke these massive punishments? Like, what is the specific glitch we keep introducing into the system?
Well, that brings us to the core focus.
Right. The profound conflict between our social systems and the way of nature. The text takes direct aim at the very pillars of modern civilization, specifically our legal systems and our borders.
Yep.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because as a reader, my immediate reaction to the author's critique of laws was serious skepticism.
I mean, understandably.
Right. I'm thinking, wait a minute, aren't laws supposed to protect human nature? Aren't they the very things keeping us safe from our worst, most violent impulses?
Well, that is the foundational assumption of modern political science. We assume human nature is inherently flawed or dangerous, and therefore needs a rigid container.
Exactly. We need rules.
But the text argues the exact opposite. It argues that legal systems, like the very concept of laws, judges, and lawyers, actively violate the way of nature.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. The premise is that by governing ourselves with artificial human-made laws, we lose our natural attributes. The text uses a very evocative phrase, actually. It says, human nature becomes forced into distortion.
Distortion, like we're being squeezed into a mold we weren't meant to hold, and it warps our actual shape.
Yeah, that's a perfect visual. The argument assumes that humans possess natural attributes of truthfulness, goodness, and beauty, and the rigid, artificial structure of a legal system restricts and controls those attributes.
So it substitutes genuine morality for just mere compliance.
Exactly. And to make this concrete, the source provides a really relatable, everyday example.
Okay.
It points to a regular person who simply wants to build a few houses on their own piece of land to shelter their family.
Which sounds completely reasonable.
Right, but under our current systems, that person is immediately hit with zoning regulations, building codes, permit fees, legal oversight.
Oh man, yeah. You literally can't chop down a tree on your own property without filling out a form in some places.
Exactly. And the text views this as a profound violation of natural freedom. It's an example of an artificial system placing a heavy, unnecessary burden on a natural human impulse to just build and dwell.
It's like the software analogy again. The system is hopelessly over-regulating the user.
Mm-hmm.
And the text points out that if you look at the rest of the natural world, it doesn't operate this way. It specifically mentions plants, animals, and insects.
Right.
It notes that they have survived and functioned in incredibly complex ecosystems for billions of years without ever needing to invent lawyers or judges.
They self-regulate based on instinct and environment.
Which, if we follow logic, leads to the next massive target in the text. I mean, if an individual doesn't need zoning laws to self-regulate on a single plot of land, what happens when you scale that philosophy up?
Oh, you mean to the national level?
Yeah. Does the concept of a national border even survive this logic? The author uses this incredibly simple but powerful analogy of migratory birds.
I love that part.
It's so good. A bird can take off and migrate freely across entire continents, literally ignoring every single border we've drawn on a map. So the text asks, why is human movement so artificially restricted?
Right. It takes that visual of the migratory bird and uses it to build a really harsh critique of nationhood. The text views the very existence of countries as equivalent to artificially building high walls.
Wow.
It literally calls the concept of a nation a big prison that we've locked ourselves inside.
Yeah, with prison.
Yeah. By drawing these arbitrary lines on a map and enforcing them with armed guards and passports, we are violating the fundamental natural law of free movement. We've basically institutionalized our own captivity.
But surely the text isn't advocating for a complete free-for-all. Like, are we talking about zero organization whatsoever? That seems like it would just lead to total collapse. I mean, if you remove the prison walls, don't you just get a riot in the yard?
That is such an important question, and the text actually provides a fascinating caveat here.
Okay, good.
It does not advocate for zero organization. It acknowledges, according to natural principles, that human societies must have governments.
Oh, really?
Yes, but it radically redefines the mechanism of what a government should be.
Okay, so if it's not writing laws and guarding borders, how does it redefine it?
It compares the ideal human government to a queen bee or a queen ant in their respective colonies.
A queen bee.
Yeah, think about how a queen bee actually functions. A queen bee doesn't micromanage the worker bees. She doesn't hold performance reviews, issue memos, or, set pollen quotas.
Right, she doesn't actively rule, she just exists.
Exactly. She provides a center of gravity. Her mere presence, her chemical signals, they provide a unifying center for the hive.
I see.
The text argues that a human government should function the exact same way. It should merely be a symbol to unite people's hearts. It should not be an organization that actively manages, regulates, and administrates the everyday lives of the people.
That is a massive distinction, like a symbol of unity versus a bureaucratic manager.
And the text posits a very direct correlation to measure this distortion. It states that the more a government expands out of proportion and tries to force its will into every single aspect of human life,
Like commerce and private behavior and all that.
exactly. The more it does that, the more it completely deviates from the way of nature. The author argues that you can measure this deviation simply by looking at the psychological state of the people.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, where the government's will is strong and intrusive, the people are bitter, stressed, and there are endless societal problems.
Makes sense.
Conversely, where there are fewer problems and people live in peace, the text claims that as proof the government has stepped back, functioning more like that queen bee.
So the ideal government is almost invisible in your daily life. It provides a cohesive identity, but it's not telling you how to build your house or where you can travel. That makes internal sense within the framework of the text.
Yeah.
But if laws and borders are these unnatural barriers, what about our personal lives? Because the text argues that this violation of nature extends far beyond just government control.
It really does.
Which made me wonder, does the text draw a line anywhere? Is literally all human invention, all intellect, considered unnatural? Like, are we supposed to throw away our tools and go back to foraging in the woods?
It's a really vital clarification to make because it's easy to assume the text is just broadly anti-progress.
Right.
But it explicitly states that it is not. It affirms that general scientific development, inventions, and the application of tools do not deviate from the way of nature. Using a tool to make a physical task easier is perfectly natural.
Okay, so a hammer is fine, a tractor is fine. Building a wheel isn't a violation.
No, the violation occurs not with the physical tool itself, but with the psychological and social systems we build that bring about a specific set of negative emotional states.
Like, well,
The source says that anything that brings anxiety, sorrow, pain, despair, or fear, instead of freedom and joy, is a red flag. That is the mechanism of deviation.
wow.
Yeah, if a system requires fear or pain to maintain itself, it is fundamentally at odds with the natural order.
And the specific examples the text gives of these fear-based, unnatural systems are, well, they really challenge the fabric of how we organize our lives. Let's look at one that is definitely going to raise some eyebrows.
Let me guess. Marriage.
Marriage.
Yeah. The text takes a very definitive, controversial stance on the human marriage system. It argues that marriage violates nature because it artificially and forcibly binds a couple together through a rigid social and legal contract.
Right.
The author claims this contradicts fluid human nature and goes against natural principles.
Okay, I have to push back on that on behalf of anyone listening.
Wait a minute.
If we abolish marriage, doesn't the author care about the stability needed to raise children?
That's the usual counterargument, yes.
Because from a biological and anthropological standpoint, isn't that exactly why we created the institution of marriage in the first place? To create a safe, stable environment for offspring?
Well, the text views that as a rationalization for control.
Really?
The author's counterargument is that this forced binding is actually the direct cause of instability. The text claims the institution of marriage leads directly to phenomena like cheating, betrayal, and domestic resentment.
Because of that distortion again.
Exactly. If the system actually conformed to human nature, people wouldn't naturally seek to break out of it. We're squeezing people into a permanent social contract that doesn't account for the changing nature of human emotion, and then we act shocked when the seams burst.
That is quite the perspective.
The compulsion to enforce permanence where nature might dictate a season, that is the violation.
That desire to enforce permanence, it's the compulsion to change things, to freeze things in place, to mold the world to our specific intellectual desire.
Exactly.
The text highlights this compulsion to change as a recurring theme of our deviation. And it gives such a wide range of examples, too.
Oh, this covers everything.
It lists mutual torture between couples trying to change each other's personalities. It lists political parties constantly in strife, condemning each other.
Religions fighting for believers.
Right. Showing mutual hostility. Countries sanctioning each other. It's all just different scales of humans refusing to let things be as they naturally are.
And it extends out to our physical environment, too. The text lists massive human engineering projects as severe violations.
Like what kind of projects?
Reclaiming the sea to make artificial land, massive deforestation, building huge hydroelectric dams.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, fundamentally altering the natural flow of rivers, grasslands, or deserts. These aren't just seen as modern ecological issues, they're framed as deeply arrogant deviations.
Like we know better than the planet.
Right. We look at a river and say, I can make this better. The way of nature says the river is already perfect.
We think we're improving the earth, but the text says we're just fighting a war against it. But I have to say, out of everything we read, the part that stopped me in my tracks was the highly specific list of academic and scientific disciplines that the author labels as unnatural.
It is quite an unexpected list.
Right. It specifically calls out success studies and nutrition studies, prenatal teaching, cloning, and even Western medicine. I mean, why on earth would trying to figure out nutrition or playing classical music for a baby in the womb be a violation of the universe's blueprint?
Well, if we look at the underlying philosophy of the text, we have to ask, what do all those disciplines have in common?
Okay.
They all represent human attempts to hyper-optimize, to meticulously control outcomes, to speed up natural processes, or to outsmart our own biology.
Oh, I see.
A success study assumes the natural rhythm of your life isn't good enough, and you must force an artificial societal outcome.
Wow, yeah.
Prenatal teaching is trying to accelerate natural cognitive development before the child is even born.
It's all just pushing.
Exactly. And Western medicine, strictly within the context of this specific philosophy, is often viewed as aggressively fighting symptoms and attacking the body, rather than harmonizing with the body's natural state of healing.
That makes a lot of sense within this framework.
The text groups them together because they all represent human intellect trying to override the natural rhythm. They are all forms of forcing the river.
Wow. Okay. It's like we are constantly trying to hack the system to get an edge, and the text is saying, stop hacking. Every time you do, you're just introducing a new virus.
Perfect analogy.
But naturally, if you're listening to this, you are probably thinking exactly what the text anticipates you are thinking.
Which is panic.
Yeah. If we strip away the laws, the borders, the nations, the forced social contracts like marriage, and our endless attempts to control our environment, wouldn't that just lead to absolute terrifying chaos?
It sounds like the plot of a post-apocalyptic movie.
It really does. So what does this all mean? The text actually lists out the exact hypothetical questions a skeptical listener would ask, doesn't it?
It does. The author is very aware of how radical and frankly terrifying this sounds to the modern ear. It lists the panicked questions we all have.
Like without countries, who protects us from invasion?
Exactly. Without legal systems and lawyers, how do we resolve disputes without violence?
Without police, wouldn't bandits and robbers just take over the streets? Wouldn't the population explode without restraint? Wouldn't warlords and armies just rise up, hoard all the resources, and conquer everything in sight? I mean, these are entirely logical fears based on literally every chapter of human history we've ever recorded.
And the text's proposed solution to these fears requires a complete paradigm shift. The author argues that our fears are based on flawed data.
Flawed data.
Yeah. To find the answers to these anxieties, we have to stop reading the writings of human thoughts. We have to stop looking at human history for guidance, because human history is just a record of our artificial deviations.
A record of the bugs in the software.
Right. Instead, the text says we must read the books without words.
The books without words. That is such a profound phrasing. It means looking at the heavens, the earth, and the mechanics of nature itself. It actually brings to mind my absolute favorite ecological analogy. If you take a massive, ancient forest and you completely leave it alone, it doesn't destroy itself.
Not at all.
It doesn't descend into chaotic self-annihilation just because there are no forest police or tree lawyers telling things how to grow. It balances itself perfectly.
Exactly.
The predators keep the prey populations in check. The decay on the forest floor feeds the new saplings. It regulates itself entirely through natural presence.
That is a perfect translation of the text's core argument regarding societal stability. The author relies heavily on what they call the natural principle of mutual generation and restraint.
Okay, how does that work?
The idea is that nature has a built-in flawless regulatory system. When anything in an ecosystem goes to an extreme, whether it's an overpopulation of a certain animal or a behavioral trend, a restraining force naturally and inevitably comes into being to balance it out. If wolves eat too many deer, the wolves naturally starve and the deer population recovers. It's an absolute law of balance.
It's entirely self-correcting.
Exactly. We don't need artificial laws because the universe already has absolute laws of balance. And the text specifically addresses that common fear of a violent law of the jungle.
Right, the idea that without civilization, life is nasty, brutish, and short, and only the most brutal survive.
Yes, the author firmly rejects that this is where following nature leads for humanity.
Good, because it doesn't view nature as this bloodthirsty gladiator arena.
Not at all. To prove this, the text points to a concept it calls the thousand-year world of heaven. It presents this as the ultimate proof of concept, a state of existence that purely follows the way of nature.
And what does that look like?
Well, it describes this state not as a brutal, chaotic struggle for survival, but as a place where everything is deeply peaceful, safe, warm, and entirely satisfying.
So,
The author's ultimate argument is that true alignment with nature doesn't result in chaos. It results in the profound, effortless harmony that our artificial societies are desperately and continually failing to achieve.
it is a massive concept to wrap your head around.
It really is.
Let's just briefly recap the journey we've been on in this deep dive. We have explored a worldview from this 2019 text that essentially takes a sledgehammer to the very foundations of modern society.
Yep.
It looks at our legal systems, our national borders, our forced social contracts, and our endless, exhausting attempts to master and manipulate our environment. And it views all of these not as the noble achievements of a civilized species, but as the root source of our anxiety, our pain, and our collective suffering.
It's a heavy critique.
It frames human civilization in its current heavily regulated form as a grand betrayal of the universal order, the way of nature.
It asks us to look closely at the complexity of our modern world. The lawyers, the judges, the zoning laws, the international sanctions, the pressure to hyper-optimize our lives.
All of it.
And ask ourselves with brutal honesty, is this actually working? Or are we just building taller, thicker walls for the prison we've put ourselves in?
Which leaves us with a truly provocative, philosophical puzzle to mull over. If we follow the logic of this text, if every human attempt to intellectually structure, organize, and regulate society is viewed as an unnatural overreach, it begs a massive question about who we fundamentally are.
Oh, definitely.
At what point in our evolutionary history did human intellect stop being a natural trait and start becoming a tool that fights against the very universe that created it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Think about it. If humans are fundamentally born of nature, a product of the earth, why are the complex societies we naturally seem compelled to build considered unnatural? Where exactly do you draw the line between our innate human instinct to organize our world and unnatural overbearing control?
It's a lot to think about.
It brings us right back to that software analogy we started with. We've built this incredibly dense, glitchy operating system called modern society. The text we explore today argues that we need a hard reset back to factory settings. The question you have to ask yourself as you look at the world around you is, are we brave enough to delete the code we spent centuries writing? Or are we just going to keep downloading more updates until the whole system inevitably crashes?